Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, boys and girls, every once in a while you've got to go to the source if you want to get the real juice. And if you're within the sound of my voice, it's that time again because you're in the seats with. And as always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And I mean, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go on a limb and assume you do because you're here, you're listening. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can find us over at Amazon, Apple, Spotify, Google, basically wherever you get your podcasts. If you can give us if you can subscribe, it'd be great. And if you can also, we archive all of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would really appreciate it. Also, please don't hesitate to check us out on social media. You can find us over at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please come by and pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large, because if we love to write about it and talk about it, we love it when you come read about it. So please come by. We're very nice people. Please come on by. On this episode, oh boy, boys and girls, we got a good one because last month was Halloween, and as people tend to do when it's the month of October and Halloween is coming up, they watch horror movies, and they'll watch horror movies that they had never seen before. And for me, that was the Maniac Cop trilogy. We had a watch along. It was fantastic. And I swear to God, I am in love with the Maniac Cop films. And they just so happen to have been re-released on 4K Blu-ray combo pack today from our friends over at Blue Underground. And my God, never have such dirty, dirty movies looked so immaculate and fantastic and filled with extras. If you are a horror fan, if you are not a horror fan, anything that Blue Underground releases really is sort of top notch. And we got to talk with not only the man who is the boss over at Blue Underground, Mr. William Lustig, but he just happened to direct the Maniac Cop trilogy, and also a little film called Vigilante, which is fantastic, and a few others like Maniac. And the man is a filmmaker in his own right, and he's a fascinating guy, and we had the distinct pleasure of sitting down and talking with him, not just about Maniac Cop and all these movies and just sort of the legacy therein, but sort of the state of the industry and why he started Blue Underground, and the importance of preserving and maintaining films like this, because, they're not Lawrence of Arabia, but they have a real audience, and they have a real voice and a real message, and they're fantastic films that deserve to be seen over and over again. And I can't stress that enough. These are really amazing films. But, if you're a fan of, horror in general, but if you need something different, if you need something that's really going to sort of take it to the next level, go check out these new releases of Maniac Cop 2 and Maniac Cop 3 on 4K Blu-ray combo pack from our friends over at Blue Underground, because, again, they might be some of the best home video releases I have seen, not just this year, but maybe in the past decade. It is first-rate stuff, and when you put that kind of thing next to the work that Criterion and Kino and places like that are doing, it's saying something. But please go support physical media any way you can, and enjoy the films, and enjoy our talk with Bill Lustig, because goddamn, it's a fun one. I can't wait for the next one. But enjoy, and we'll talk to you later. But just to kick it off, I have to make a bit of a confession. I think during the pandemic is when I've really discovered the cinema of Bill Lustig, because I had never seen Vigilante before, and I had never seen any of the Maniac Cops before. And I got to say, man, I loved them. And they really feel born out of not just New York, but definitely sort of that grindhouse sort of era of the 70s. And like, can you walk me through, I guess, maybe sort of the inspiration for some of these films? Because I mean, there's obviously a through line, but there's an amazingly clear through line.
Well, first off, in the 70s was my formative years for filmmaking. I would say late 60s, 70s. Okay. I was very young. I was a teenager. And I was a frequenter of the grindhouses. And in fact, I used to cut school, and I would go 8:30 in the morning to 42nd Street, where for 85 cents, I would see a double feature and often see another double feature. And I was just addicted to cinema. I wanted to make movies, and I wanted to make movies at a kind of an early age. I think I was 13, 14. I wanted to make movies because I was so blown away by so many films. They just affected me. You know, films like Bonnie and Clyde, Bullet, The Wild Bunch, Midnight Cowboy. I mean, I could go on and on. The French Connection. All these movies just really influenced me. You know, and I wanted to make movies. Now, we used to go to 42nd Street. 42nd Street was the dumping ground for the films we now hold in high regard. They were the dumping ground for the Fulci films, for the Dario Argento films, for the Mario Bava films, for the Enzo Castellari movies. Because in the 70s, there was a tax law in America called the tax shelter.
Right.
And it would give wealthy people a deduction if they bought movies, often from overseas, and they gave them to a distributor like Joe Brenner or Nick Demetrolis or any of these people, and the distributor would release the film. They literally also give the money for the prints and advertising and everything to the distributor, and the distributor's obligation was to give it what the government considered to be a effort to release the movie. Mm. And of course, the movies didn't make any money. You know, they have to release, like, say, in 6 cities or something. And one of the dumping grounds was 42nd Street. And of course, I was a willing dumpster. And I got to see all these movies. And I was just in love with them. I as well on 42nd Street as mainstream movies. I mean, I could go see, in one day, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Fellini's Roma. They were all playing on 42nd Street. Not that Fellini's Roma was a tax shelter movie, but it was, they all played on 42nd Street. There was a theater called the Apollo, which played foreign language prestigious films.
I mean, it feels like a special time that we don't necessarily give enough credence to. Because wasn't there about a dozen cinemas within like a 3-block radius?
Within 1 block. It wasn't 3 blocks. It was within 1 block. And if my memory serves me correct, it might have been 10. I'm trying to actually kind of picture it in my mind's eye, going through the street. But it was 1 block between 7th and 8th Avenue, 42nd Street, which is now all fucked up because of Disney and shit. And, they got a fucking multiplex, AMC and Regal, and fuck these people. My favorite movies I used to see at the New Amsterdam, which became the home of Lion King, Anyway, so there was this time, and it was amazing. You go there in the morning, and everything was under $1. Some theaters were 99 cents, some were 85, some were even 75, and you would see double features, obviously 35 millimeter because there wasn't DCPs then, and it was, for me, it was heaven. It was heaven, and I did get to learn math because I used to look at they would post near the box office, the showtimes. Right. So I would actually go to several theaters before I decided what order of the films I would go see them in. There were some films I said, well, I can maybe miss the beginning of it and I'll be okay, But I went from movie to movie. There was one day I did 11 movies. That was my record.
That's fantastic.
I used to be able to name them all. I can remember some, but I can't remember them all.
I think my record is 6 or 7, and that's in the middle of a festival, but 11 is impressive.
Well, I went from 8:30 in the morning until after midnight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, in addition to 42nd Street, there was a time in New York City where every neighborhood, excuse me, where every neighborhood had retrospective theaters. So, there was, I mean, when I say every neighborhood, like Manhattan, let's say,
right.
Manhattan probably had a good, I don't know, 6 or 8 repertory theaters where they would play double features, 35 millimeter double features of classic films or near-classic films. So I was able to get such a rich history of films by just going to these cinemas. I'm telling you, it was incredible. We don't have that today. Today, we're lucky to have one.
Yeah, no, you're right. And what ultimately got you behind the camera? Or behind the scenes, as it were? Because, I mean, I know not everyone starts directing, obviously.
Yeah, no. What got me behind the scenes was there was a family friend, a dear family friend named Peter Petrilla, who went by the name Peter Savage, who was, quite honestly, he was a gangster. But he, at the same time, was an aspiring filmmaker and actor. And he was making these really bad movies in the late 60s, awful movies that were barely getting released, but he was making movies. And I used to talk to him, and every time we'd have a family party or dinner or something, I would bend his ear and telling him how much I loved this and this. I remember telling him one time, Easy Rider, what a great movie it was. And of course, he was old school. And, he would be, disparaging everything I would talk about. I remember one day going to his office, this is several years later, going to his office and raving about, I just seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was the greatest movie. It's incredible. And he's reading the New York Daily News. He goes, look at this. They gave it 0 stars in the Daily News. So he definitely represented a different generation. But I loved Pete. I really loved him dearly. And so it was through Pete that I met people in the film industry that allowed me to work on movies as a production assistant, working in the editing room. And I would work after school hours, and I would then eventually when I was in high school, I started to really just become so hooked on editing and working in production that I skipped school altogether. I mean, they tried to give me a thing where if I came in the morning, I could get out by noon and go do what I wanted to do. But I was bored to tears in school, and I wanted to make movies. So when I turned 18 during the last year of high school, I signed myself out, so I never graduated high school.
Wild.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, obviously you got some experience, doing production assistants and doing some other stuff, but I mean, obviously, I mean, Maniac was sort of the breakout for you, especially under your own name, if I'm correct.
Right. I did 2 porns, and because Pete, everybody in the independent business in the early 70s went to porn because that was the gold rush. It was the Deep Throat, Devil and Miss Jones era. Everybody wanted to make a fortune. You could invest very little money and get back millions. And so Pete went into porn. In fact, the first porn film I worked on for Pete, I'm actually having the poster framed as we speak. I'm going to put up in my office because I finally found it. It was called Hypnoerotica, and I was a production assistant on it. And it was that period. So obviously, if I'm going to make a move at 21 years old, the only place I could find the money would be to do a porn feature, which I did.
Well, I mean, I love the fact that porn seemed to be the proving ground for so many independent filmmakers just during that time period. It really,
well, sure.
It blows my mind.
Across the street from the editing room was Wes Craven and Sean Cunningham's office, and they were doing porn. And there was, Joey Zito, and there was a slew of people who were doing porn at that time, who later went on to mainstream.
Now, I mean, just to jump ahead a little bit, I got to ask you a little bit about Maniac Cop, because I love the film, and we're definitely going to talk about 2 and 3 as well, because the new editions are ready and they're out on 4K for everyone to enjoy. But I love the concept of it because I mean, it really does feel like Death Wish, like sort of turned up to not 11, but about 100. I mean, for you, like, what was sort of the impetus as sort of you saw the first script, and you got started working on number one? Like, did you have any kind of sense of what it could become when you saw it initially?
Yes, I did. What happened was Larry and I had a lunch where he asked me if I had ever done a sequel, if I ever would consider doing a sequel or remake of my movie Maniac. And I said, nah, that was closed. Little did I know 20 years later.
Yeah.
But and then during the course of the meeting, there was the period of RoboCop, Beverly Hills Cop, all these cop, things. And so he said, what about Maniac Cop? As soon as he said it, it gelled in my head. I saw the movie. Now, what I saw was ultimately the movie we made, but I knew it was going to work. And I said, and so Larry went off, and I started shooting the movie without a script because our lunch was in February, and the St. Patrick's Day parade in New York was, of course, St. Patrick's Day in March. So I call up Bruce Campbell. I say, Bruce, listen, I'm going to do a movie called Maniac Cop. I want you to star in it, and I want you to fly to New York. I'll send you a ticket, and I want you to wear clothes that we can later duplicate when we make the movie. Then I got, Sam Raimi was in New York at the time waiting for the financing for his movie Darkman. And so I Sam and I were hanging out, and Sam was a ham. He loves to be in front of the camera. And so Larry wrote this news reporter script and give it to Sam. And Sam is, reading the script with characters he's referring to that we have no idea how they fit into a movie. But I just wanted him against the backdrop of the parade. It was as wacky as that. And then I then have a meeting with Jim Glickenhaus. This is in April, and Jim Glickenhaus and I are talking, and we've known each other. We shared offices together at one time, and he goes, Jim comes from a very wealthy family, and he's talking about how his family had just sold something or did something, and he had made all these millions, and blah 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 blah. And I was kind of frankly, I was broke. I was really in a low ebb for myself financially. So I said, Jim, listen, you talk about millions, like I talk about, a $20 bill. Okay. Why don't you give me a million, and you'll never have to ask me how I'm doing. I'll be like, every morning I'll be Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music up on the mountain singing your praises. And he goes, well, how about if I give you $1 million, you go out and make a movie? And I said, I have just the movie. I pitched a Maniac Cop at the lunch. He bit, and within a couple of months, we put the money, the financing was there. Jim underwrote the whole cost of the movie. The movie wound up costing about $1.25 million. And he underwrote the financing of the film. And by August, we were out shooting it.
And I love that. And I love that you bring up Jim, because you both have such similar styles as well. And just in watching the films, I mean, not only is asking Bruce to play the straight man in a movie like this kind of perverse and completely enjoyable, which I loved, but watching some of the action, I mean, especially I think in Maniac Cop 2, like it feels to me like you couldn't legally get away with some of those car chases that you shot in Maniac Cop 2 today. Can you talk to me a little bit just in terms of how you wanted these films to feel? Because I mean, go ahead.
When I approached Larry's script of Maniac Cop, I saw Bruce Campbell as my Dennis O'Keefe in a film noir. That's how I envisioned Bruce. Straight man, he's caught up in something, he did something wrong by cheating on his wife, but that cheating led to him being accused of murdering his wife. And it sort of puts him in a film noir world. And that's how I saw the movie. And I saw the Maniac Cop. I kept teetering on Maniac Cop. I kept teetering as being a zombie. Then I thought of him as, well, he's really kind of Lee Marvin in Point Blank. He's the ghost that comes back after being screwed over, and I kind of thought of him a little bit like that, so I kind of played it a little ghost-like, how he got screwed by the by the system, by the city of New York. All these things were percolating in my head, and I couldn't really decide how to do it. You know, I was always kind of fluctuating with these ideas, even in the way it was directed. I didn't quite know what to do. Sometimes I wanted him to be a ghost, where there'd be a puff of smoke when he disappeared, you know. So I really hadn't really nailed it down, to be quite honest. When I did Maniac Cop 2, I took more of the film noir. I took my only direction to Robert Davi, quite frankly. He said his recollection was I told him he was Popeye Doyle. No, I told him he was Robert Ryan in On Dangerous Ground. That was the direction.
I like that, yeah.
I wanted the coat. I wanted the hat. I wanted him to be Robert Ryan. If you remember the opening of On Dangerous Ground, when Robert Ryan chases the criminal and corners him and starts pounding the shit out of him, and as he's pounding him, he's saying to the criminal, "Why are you making me do this to you?" You know. Anyway, I just loved On Dangerous Ground, and I said, "Robert, that's you. You're Robert Ryan," and that's how I kind of approached Maniac Cop 2. Again, more of a film noir that I did. Oh, and I also, what I loved about it, it allowed me to introduce Universal monsters. Like I had the serial killer with the beard was my Igor. I wanted him, my direction to Leo Rossi, Bela Lugosi, son of Frankenstein. So he wasn't going to do a Hungarian accent.
Right.
He did instead a white trash accent. But it was the same relationship between him and the monster. Him being the submissive, to the monster.
Yeah.
Subservient.
Subservient. That's it. Yeah.
Subservient to the monster. And so, yeah, that was it.
No, I mean, I love it. I mean, just hearing you describe it, I mean, and you're right. It is this real sort of amazing marriage between sort of the classic horror and sort of the classic film noir. And I mean, I watched them, and I mean, it's one of those things where I'm so glad they're preserved, because these are such unique films. And I mean, I'm kind of curious for you, because obviously you started Blue Underground. Like, was that born out of you wanting to preserve your own stuff and other people's stuff? Like, talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, first off, Maniac Cop is a sore spot for me, because
yeah,
the company that put it out really did not do a proper job with the film.
Yeah.
Recently, I inquired about the negative of Maniac Cop and was told, unfortunately, it's lost. So it's not preserved. Maniac Cop 2 is definitely preserved. It's the way it should look. If you look at the 4K, that is the way Maniac Cop 2 was meant to look. Maniac Cop 3, the same way. It was meant to look the way it looks. And but
even though you took your name off it?
What?
Even though you took your name off number 3?
Yeah. Well, the reason for that, and I've come to regret it. I walked off the movie one day. There was a combination of factors, but at the end of the day, the problem with it is the movie was written as a certain kind of movie, and because of financial reasons, it was changed to another kind of movie without the script being rewritten. So it became a situation where pages of the script were ripped out because they didn't make any sense anymore.
Right.
And you know, you can never start a movie without a complete script. That's just the way it is. You just can't do it. If I had been honest about it, I should have, in pre-production, shut everything down, demanded everything shut down, and get the script in shape. And then we go out and shoot it. I basically dumped, when I finished shooting the script that we had, and Joel Soisson, who's really the nicest guy in the world, who was the producer on it, started writing, because Larry washed his hands. He started writing new scenes, so we could fill out the running time of the film. I was handed pages, and they were sickening to me, because they were just the stuff that I always avoid trying to shoot, which is sappy bullshit filler scenes. And instead of staying and fighting the fight and trying to mold the picture, I just threw up my hands and said, you know what? I shot the script. I'm done with this. And I quit. I quit on the set, actually. And Joel took over. And so the reason I took my name off of it and Joel's name is I thought it would only be fair because it's neither of our movies. It's sort of a combination, you know.
Right.
The opening scene on the gun range is something that was the day I quit. That was Joel's, you know, and there's some of mine, and there's, you know, it's kind of a mishmash of stuff. So that's why I took my name off of it. I didn't think it would be fair for either one of us to be really, and Joel agrees. It's not either of our films. It's sort of a combination job.
Now, I mean, I've got to ask, because this is something I'm really curious about. Obviously, all of your releases under Blue Underground are just fully loaded, and they look absolutely fantastic. And they feel like releases where you take your time. Like if you're going to announce something and they're like, no, it's going to take more time to get this done right, we get it done right. Can you talk to me a little bit just what sort of was the birth of you wanting to start your own label for home video?
Well, it really comes back to 42nd Street, then the video era, where movies that were made by Dario Argento and Fulci and these people were never given their proper release. So when I started with Anchor Bay, when I started producing special editions in conjunction with Anchor Bay and later Blue Underground, it was always my intent to treat movies that previously had been released in all kinds of butchered forms the same way Criterion treated Fellini and Truffaut films. Right. And that's still my goal. I mean, I just finished doing the check discs on Toolbox Murders. And I'm going through it like it's, you know, like it's 8.5, you know, I'm checking every frame, I'm doing this, you know, and Greg Chick, my associate Greg Chick, who I think you know.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, he is fantastic. I've sort of instilled in him, I believe, that don't let anything get by us. The best we can do, I mean, nothing is more aggravating for either one of us is seeing a white speck show up when we look at the check disc, because we know we're too far along to fix it. And we see a little white speck in the corner of the screen, and both of us go nuts. You know, how did we miss it? You missed it. Oh, you missed it. Anyway, that's Blue Underground in a nutshell. Two idiots who look at these movies and go through them with a fine-tooth comb.
But also, I've got to imagine it was, at least part of it was at least being able to have control over your own films as well to a certain degree.
Well, of course, that's a big benefit. You know, to be able to release a proper Maniac or Vigilante or Cop 2 and 3, and Uncle Sam coming up. Those are, there is an advantage to that, of course. But I didn't do it for that reason. I honestly don't treat my films any different than I treat a third party's film. I don't. I really treat all the films the same to give them the best.
And I mean, people don't necessarily, at least people on the outside looking in or people who aren't hardcore fans, don't necessarily understand sort of the art house treatment that you're giving sort of grindhouse releases on these things. And I mean, because they're really fantastic to watch. And I mean, when you're going into something like, how do you sort of pull yourself back from going, okay, maybe we've got enough, or this is going to cost too much to make more extras? How do you sort of draw the line? Because I mean, obviously it really feels like, for me, you're producing a lot of this stuff almost from a fan first perspective.
It is. Yeah. And I'll tell you something else. It would be unfair if I said that I don't think about cost, but it isn't the priority. My priority is to put out the very best. It's always been my position, even when I was making movies. If it was going to cost more or to make it better, it was always my thing that I am devoted, number one, to the audience. I'm there to give the customer the best job I can do. You know, I will push for it to do the very best job I can do. And cost becomes, for me, secondary. It's never primary, because I have no one to answer to except for myself.
Right.
I cut the checks, you know, and, you know, at times I say, you know, I make it up in the aggregate, because I don't look at, like, if one film really cost a lot more than I wish to have spent on it, I'll make it up on the next one, or the, you know, and I look at the business as being in the aggregate, not the individual films. So I don't really make the cost the primary consideration. I'd be honest with you, Greg thinks that it costs more than I do. He really does. Sometimes he pulls me back and he says, Bill, do we really want to spend the money to do this? Because it's so minor, and it's like, and it's hard for me to say no, that we can't, it's to let something go. It's hard for me.
Right. No, but you know what? That's how you develop brand loyalty. I mean, especially in this business. I'm up here in Toronto, and obviously I work a lot with some of your partners up here, and I know people in the genre community, and Blue Underground is the gold standard. And it's one of those things that you're not going to hit that level of gold standard unless you give a shit. And I just want to say thank you, quite frankly.
Oh, I give a shit. I honestly do. Maybe to my detriment at times, but I do give a shit. I care about what we put out. Cost is never the primary reason for anything.
No, just to put a bow on this, how important is it from your perspective just to have active preservation of not just these films, but film in general? Because people will look at sort of the bigger studio stuff and even a lot of TV stuff that has sort of been put out there and restored and sort of is out there for the world to see. But from a film standpoint, especially when you dive into some of the more independent productions of the 70s and the 80s and the 60s and even overseas, there are so many films out there that are in dire need of help.
That's true. And the horrible truth is a lot of elements no longer exist that would enable you to do it. I don't take on a project unless I know I got reasonably good elements that will yield a good result. I've turned down a lot of projects because the negatives have been lost. I'd have to use a print and this and that. And I've regretfully turned down stuff that I wish I had put out. And I'm glad there's other companies that will do it. The Vinegar Syndrome, Severin. These companies aren't as, I'm not going to say, I think these guys do a great job, but they do a great job with what they have. And I tend to want to make them Criterion. So that's why a lot of companies, a lot of films have gone wanted. And, like myself, the Maniac Cop, original Maniac Cop negative being lost is horrifying to me because the film now is what it is. That lousy Synapse Blu-ray is the only thing that stands.
Yeah, I actually ended up watching it on Shudder, to be perfectly honest. It looked fine.
Well, it's the same master. Well, the simple problem is we shot the movie in August with a film that's supposed to take place in the winter in New York.
Right.
And if you look at the original negative, it's got the warmth of summer. And it's still bright. It's got a lot of brightness to it. And so it needed to be graded for what time of year it's supposed to be. And it's supposed to be a darker looking film because at times you actually can see the partial makeup on the Maniac Cop's face. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
Things like that should have been corrected. And
no,
you also see the wires, that could have been removed. Things like that just is, to me, terrible. Remove the wires cost nothing. And yet it was just left. So to me, I'm looking at it as kind of a bad behind the scenes.
A prequel. Call it a prequel. Maniac Cop 2 is the real movie. This is sort of somebody else's movie. Yeah.
It's horrible. No, it's horrible because we put a lot of work, a lot of people, not just myself.
No, for sure.
But a lot of the people who worked on that film worked hard and cared about it. And now it was put out by an idiot.
Now, just to put a bow on this, when I watched the Maniac Cop movies, they felt unremakeable. But I'm sure over the years you got various pitches, but you obviously got a pitch from Nick Refn to do Maniac Cop. And I'm not going to ask you for details or anything like that, but what was it about him that made you say yes?
Well, first off, I hadn't been approached. In fact, when I was approached on the Maniac remake, I thought, I was flown to Paris and met with the producer and everything. I thought they meant Maniac Cop.
Really?
Yeah. But they were talking about my original Maniac. So I just, keep my mouth shut, and we do a Maniac. But I had been approached mainly during the video period.
Right.
The company that put it out on I think it was Trans World. They wanted me to do another Maniac Cop, and there was all these people. But the thing about Nick was, Nick and I have been pals for a long time. And Nick had a vision of how to do a Maniac Cop feature that would be different from what I did, but stayed with the essential concept.
Right.
And originally it was written by Ed Brubaker as a feature film. And there were complications involving Larry Cohen. And we had a start date. We were going to make it for a company called Wild Bunch. We had a start date. Everything was ready to go. And there were complications caused by Larry Cohen. Okay, fine. Then as time went on, suddenly making a feature really made more sense to make it as a TV series.
Mm.
It's just the way it is, because movies like Maniac Cop and I'm sad to say, for even the best of the B movies, theaters, there's no place in theaters for them.
No, it's true.
And, you know, I'm not calling it a B movie because I think it's a masterpiece. Last night in Soho, the fact that it played 1 week in theaters, to me, I mean, I didn't make the movie, but I'm as heartbroken as if I had, because I loved the movie so much.
Yeah.
I saw it opening day and I thought this movie is fan-fucking-tastic, you know? Now, I haven't seen Titane, but that also suffered the same fate. I mean, it was out of theaters before I got a chance to see it, you know? And so it's sad to me that there is no place in theaters anymore for films that you and I and your audience love. There's just no place. It's become the only films that exist now are the Marvel films.
No,
I hear
it's
the
true.
Eternals is a piece of shit, but I just read that did this enormous amount of business over the weekend. I can't sit through those fucking movies. I honestly can't sit through those fucking movies. I just watched Black Widow at home, and there were some parts I thought it was okay, but I just feel like it's like eating a Big Mac.
I mean, there are interesting parts, but it ends up being too cookie cutter. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's like a Big Mac. It's just not. It's not fulfilling for me. You know, I watch it and, you know, I just come away feeling like, ugh, you know. And it's not that they're not skilled filmmakers. How they do those effects are amazing, you know. But at the end of the day, there's no jeopardy. There's nothing about it that engages me. I saw the James Bond film. I thought it was fantastic. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
I thought it was great. I thought, man, this film is hit it out of the park. It was amazing. Amazing. I loved it. 2 weeks in theaters and it's gone.
No,
How could that be? How could that be?
It's the turnover of product. It's the world we live in. It's like hit it now and then dispose of it and move on. And
Wow.
and there's some good stuff that shouldn't be disposed.
How could that be so disposable? It was a great movie.
I mean, 20 years ago, that movie would play for 6 months.
Of course it would have.
Yeah.
These things really, it really bothers me, because how does a young person, I mean, Maniac would have never seen the light of day, except on Shudder. It would have played on Shudder, and you know, that would have been it. And these movies playing on Shudder isn't paying any enormous license fees.
No, of course not. Yeah.
And they're paying modest license fees, and it's very sad to me.
Do you think retrospective cinema is generally going the way of the dodo? Because I mean, like we've been saying, I mean, other than the occasional spot screening here or there isn't exactly any sort of sustained business for that anymore.
Well, the only way it can happen is, and this is, I have to say, I really give a lot of credit to Quentin. QT has, his new Bev has done an enormous service for us in LA, playing films 35 millimeter, his devotion to 35, and the films he plays as double features. You know he's not making any money at the theater. You know, he's basically underwriting its loss. That's what he's doing. And I've got to admire that. I have to admire that, because that really is incredible what he's doing. And but you know, in New York, you have the Anthology, you have film, you know, places like the Film Forum, but they're just not the even the Film Forum is not really doing, like a month of retrospects. At least I haven't seen it, where they play double features of Colombian noir films or William Castle movies. They're not doing that because it costs so much money to ship prints and find the right materials. And it's a sad situation that this stuff is just relegated to video.
And it's the same up here in Toronto. We get the occasional one-off or spot screening, depending on who has a print or what's accessible and what's not. But that's really about it. And
it's sad.
It is sad because, I mean, these movies were meant to be seen on the big screen. I mean, obviously, preferably in 35 millimeter, but it's just.
I don't even care. Honestly, I don't care if it's a DCP. I mean, I know Quentin is devoted to 35, and God bless him. But I don't care. We got to see the movies on a big screen with an audience. And I don't care if it's DCP or if it's 16 millimeter, whatever it is, they should be up there on the big screen with an audience where you could discuss it afterwards. And you're not distracted by the phone ringing or this or that. You're just focused on the movie.
Maniac Cop 2 should not be watched on your phone. That's a fact.
Well, the fact is, I mean, when I talk to younger people, they're watching them on their phone, their laptop, and it's so discouraging. Now, I'm fortunate. I have an 83-inch TV in my living room with Dolby Atmos sound. So I'm, watching them on a pretty big screen and stuff. But, a friend of mine's coming over this afternoon. We'll probably watch a double feature. And, that's it. That's it.
It'll never quite be the same as paying 75 cents for a double feature in a theater that
on a huge
probably
screen.
hasn't been cleaned in God knows how long.
But I hate to be that person who talks about the olden days. It makes me feel old. It makes me feel really old. But that's the truth. It's an experience that a new generation just doesn't have. They don't feel the need to go out to a cinema. Except if it's a big event like the Marvel films.
Yeah. But you know what? Just to put a bow on this, I just have to say thank you because with not just your films, but your releases, you're definitely getting us as close as possible back to that old school experience, showing these films the way they deserve to be seen.
Thank you.
And I absolutely love them, man. And this was a pleasure to talk to you today. I had a lot of fun.
Well, good. And thank you, and thank your audience. And I really, if any of them have any questions in the future, let them pass them through you, and we do another one of these.
Absolutely, man. Keep up the good work, Bill. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Have a good Sunday.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.